What's up, Pitt fans? Welcome back to another Pitt mailbag here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. He is Chris Carter. I am Noah Hiles. We are your Pitt beat reporters here for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And Chris, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Noah. You said we talk in 2023, and here we are in a brand new year.
Yes, a new year, but still a ton of questions to answer, and we'll get right into it. A very eventful weekend for Pitt athletics with a Sun Bowl victory, the basketball team upsetting North Carolina at home. Just a very exciting Friday for Pitt to wrap up a pretty successful 2022 athletic calendar year. And we'll start with a Sun Bowl related question. Jeff wants to know, is it fair to criticize Pat Narduzzi and his staff for not starting Nick Patti over Keaton Slovis this season? Nick Patti, of course, led Pitt to a Sun Bowl win over number 18 UCLA. He completed 20 of 41 passes for over 200 yards, ran for 80, and of course, the big story with him was that final minute drive where he set up Ben Sauls for the game-winning field goal. Chris, you want to start this question here, or shall I?
Sure. No, I can start it. I mean, sure, the criticism is fair. Nick Patti comes in against a ranked team, neutral territory, and gets you a win. And you saw the things that we saw was just the team getting behind him, right? Like you could see they were motivated. They wanted to win for him. There was the clip of Bub Means saying, "You're my number one quarterback" after the game. It was very obvious that there were a lot of people happy for Nick Patti, but that also comes with the guy who's been the backup on the team for 4 years, right? Like he was behind Kenny Pickett for many years, played for them in the Peach Bowl, and no one blamed him for breaking his collarbone when he scored a touchdown early in that game, and everyone just felt bad for him. And then he comes in and almost leads a comeback win against Tennessee. In the second game of the season while playing on one leg. So, I get that there's a lot of that going around. And I think it's even fair to say, Keelan Slovis was bad this year. And he wasn't good. He came out the last game of the year where he threw 3 touchdowns was his best game. And it just came way too late, and Nick Patti was injured for a bit of this year, but you're thinking, hey, maybe if he had started against Tennessee, maybe he doesn't get hurt. Maybe he plays that whole game and they win, and then they can go on to beat Georgia Tech and Louisville and maybe UNC. I don't know. I'm not going to say that Nick Patti's going to solve all your problems, but I will say this about Pitt. This is not as easy of a decision because I think everyone's navigating the transfer portal right now and how it works and trying to paint the picture of you can come to my school and have a good chance to play there, because the transfer portal was what got them Keaton Slovis. It's what got them Phil Dracovic, and they're excited for that. And they know that they want future transfer portal quarterbacks, that probably benching their transfer portal quarterback in the middle of the year might be the wrong tone to set for future ones that they wanted to get in the portal. So I get that there's something that they were trying to balance there, and there's something there, but at the same time, you look at the results, and it's hard to argue that maybe they could have done better if Nick Patti was their starter all year long.
Yeah, I think it's easy to argue for Patti to be the starter now in hindsight. When we saw how the year played out with Keaton Slovis, and when we saw what Nick Patti did in his one start this season, yeah, it's easy to say, oh yeah, this guy should have been the starter. I don't know if it is that easy though. I think that if Keaton Slovis wasn't named the starting quarterback in the beginning of the season, people would have been incredibly confused and probably they would have been pissed off about it. I mean, this was a very exciting transfer get for Pitt. When Slovis came here, there were some people, and myself included, I thought, wow, they're really not going to miss a beat at the quarterback position. I mean, Keaton Slovis, when he was at USC, there was a time where he was viewed as the number 1 draft prospect in his class. Everyone thought that he could be a first-round talent after the freshman season he had with the Trojans. And obviously, things went downhill after that. But there was so much optimism connected to Slovis. And I know, as someone who started the job in the midst of training camp, Chris, you were there a week before I was, and talking to everyone who covered that training camp, when they would say, oh, Patti and Slovis are battling for the job, everyone just kind of rolled their eyes. Like, are you kidding me? No, they just brought in a star quarterback from USC. How are you not going to start this guy? And my question to the people who would say, well, they should have benched him mid-season and put Patti in, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I guess I would rebuttal by saying when. When did you want to put Patti in? Because you talked about that Tennessee game, Chris. He got really hurt in that game. First things first, also, when he was healthy, he did not look that good. In that third quarter, he played pretty bad against Tennessee compared to Slovis, who looked really good against Tennessee. And that's just one game or whatever. But he got injured there. And Narduzzi, this kind of what kind of hurts you when you don't have an injury report to go off of. I'm pretty sure that Nick Patti wasn't really available until November anyway. Yeah. So during that 1-3 stretch that Pitt had, where it lost to Georgia Tech, where it lost to Louisville and North Carolina, I don't think he was available. So I mean, they weren't going to bench him for Nate Yarnell. So that would be my rebuttal. Is by the time Nick Patti was healthy and back to 100%, Pitt was winning again. So when you look back at the quotes that Pat gave us saying Heaton was the best available option, maybe he was saying a little bit more than what we originally took that to be. Maybe he was saying, look, if Nick Patti was healthy, we would have a quarterback battle. But because Pat Narduzzi doesn't give away any injury information,
he does not
at all, unless if it's a season-ending thing, which it clearly wasn't with Patti because he played. I think that might have been the case where had Nick Patti been healthy, this might have been somewhat of a conversation, but he wasn't. So by the time he was back to full health, Pitt was rolling again. They said we might as well just ride it out with Keaton. I don't know. I think it's clear that they weren't as gung-ho about Kedon Slovis as they claimed to be throughout the whole year. Where he, Narduzzi admitted on signing day, they were looking elsewhere for quarterback help, regardless if Kedon Slovis was sticking around or not. So, and you've seen and heard how highly Cignetti speaks of Nick Patti, of the teammates, everyone connected to that program. So I don't know. Maybe if he's healthy, he does get a look. Pat Narduzzi has changed starting quarterbacks in midseason plenty of times. I'd be hard pressed to say if Nick Patti wasn't completely healthy, he wouldn't have at least considered it. But we'll never know. It's hindsight 2020 at this point.
No, I agree. It's it's one of those things that you can't tell. And you're right. When by the time Nick Patti was healthy was when they started their 5-0 win streak to end the season. So, it's one of those things you can play the guessing game a lot. You could probably do the same thing if the defense gets a couple more stops here and there. But I think the lesson here for this situation is, I think Pitt is going to look into their future scenarios when they have this, and they're probably going to look at it and say, you know what, we might put in a guy who gets the team going. But we'll see if Nick Patti is kind of an example of that moving forward, because I'm not sure how many other guys are going to stick around and be the number 2 quarterback for years and kind of carry the pedigree that he did coming into the season.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever see another 5-year backup in the history of college football. And just in Power 5 college football, with the portal, I don't think we'll ever see that. But we'll move on. Another Nick Patti question. Is there a chance that Nick Patti comes back to Pitt in 2023? If so, do you think he will get a real opportunity to start? The answers to those questions said are no and no. Nick Patti has indicated, or he's already said that was his last game at Pitt. It might not be his last college football game, although I could honestly see it being his final college football game. What a better way to end your career than that one. Now, granted, he could look at himself like a Ben DiNucci, where he could go to an FCS or a smaller program, have a really good final season, and maybe get taken in the 7th round or get an opportunity on an NFL practice squad or something. If that's something that he believes he can do, then I say go for it if you're Nick Patti. But the reality here is that's his last game at Pitt. Regardless if he sticks around, or that's his last game as a Pitt starter, I should say, because even if he does stick around, they've got a guy who they really wanted. This Slovis was an exciting name, but this is a perfect fit with Jurkovec because this is Cignetti's guy. As much as everyone loves Nick Patti in Pitt's building, Cignetti would pick Jurkovec over pretty much any quarterback in the country to run his offense, within reason, obviously. He's not going to, turn down a Hendon Hooker or a CJ Stroud or anything like that. But I think out of any option in the portal, this is exactly who Pitt wanted to land with Jurkovec. And the fact that they brought in Veyer as well shows that they have their quarterback room as it wants to be constructed. I think they've moved on, and Nick Patti's going to have to move on as well. It is kind of tragic that, Pitt fans only got to see him start 3 games, and he only played to the end of 2 of those 3. And he probably could have been a decent starting quarterback in blue and gold. And we'll never get to write that story, but I think his time as a Panther is done. Chris?
Yeah, from what I've heard too, Nick Patti, he's done all the things, at Pitt. He's coming in a bowl game. He's coming into 2 bowl games. Finished one. Got Pitt its second bowl win under Pat Narduzzi. And I agree with you. Like, he knows that, like, if Phil Jacobic's coming here, he doesn't need to go through that ride again of maybe competing in the off season. And he knows this is going to be Jacobic's team. So you're right. Go to a smaller school, you'll come there as the Power 5 dude who won a bowl game, and you'll be the hero for a year playing against competition that I think, kind of suits in. You're right. Ben DiNucci, I think, is a great comparison. You could work your way to being that gritty guy that people like to see as a winner on the field because he'll show up for his team and practice squad stuff. He's 7th round pick, practice squad guy, maybe get to start sometime in his NFL career. That's worth money. And Nick Patti's looking at that. He's still looking at the opportunity to make money with a professional career in football. So if you're in his shoes, it makes a ton of sense to go somewhere else where you're going to be a starter and get a chance to lead a team and say, you're like, hey, this is what I do week to week playing football. So it makes a lot of sense. I know Pitt fans will be probably sorry to see him go, but just one of those situations where, like, it's remarkable that he stuck around this long for Pitt.
Yeah. I mean, a 6th year as a backup would be a tough ask for anyone. On another Pitt football note, Jim wants to know, is Pitt finished recruiting for 2023? Jim, the answer to that question is no, Pitt never stops recruiting. No college football program ever stops recruiting, especially with the transfer portal where you can bring in whoever at any time now, essentially. It's 24/7, 365, baby. And for a perfect example of this, just last night, Pitt offered Tyrone Broden, a 6'7" receiver from Bowling Green.
Yeah,
who's in the portal. And I mean, you want to talk about an attractive addition, potential addition for Pitt. I mean, while they just brought in 4 receivers out of high school for their 2023 signing class, and they have all 3 receivers expected to return, or all 3 starters, I should say, expected to return. I mean, you add in a 6'7" guy with college experience. That's just one of many guys I'm sure Pitt still has their eye on. There's a couple of other Whippeal guys that I wouldn't be shocked to see land at Pitt, be it Patrick Body or Davis. Both of those are Gateway kids, or a couple other players as well. I wouldn't be shocked to see Pitt continuing to get after it, and that's what the coaching staff is doing right now. I can promise you, as we're recording this mailbag on Monday afternoon or Tuesday. Is it Monday, Tuesday? It's a holiday. I don't know. Monday afternoon. I can promise you that Pat Narduzzi and his staff, they're out there. They're visiting players or schools or whatever they're doing, but they're out on the recruiting trail.
And on top of that, we're talking about high school kids and everything, and transfers maybe as well. But like this is around the time, and over the next month or so, you're going to see a lot of changing of staffs at college football programs. And when those staffs change, the promises made by certain coaches to certain recruits it's going to make kids go, whoa, wait a second, this isn't what I thought I was stepping into. And then it's going to cause kids to reevaluate. They'll say, hey, I'm redeciding. Please respect my decision. I'm, reopening my recruitment. And you best believe Pitt will probably be in the mix with a lot of other programs to try and win players like that. It doesn't guarantee that they'll get some there, but it will kind of put you in a position to say, hey, maybe they do start to pull in some other guys. So as you said, Noah, perfectly, recruiting never stops in college sports. You're always recruiting. If you're not always recruiting, you're behind. And I think that's what Pitt knows that. That's why they're able to pull in the classes that they do. And yeah, they're not the greatest classes in the world, but they're competitive. They fit the Pat Narduzzi model that has kind of built them up to be this competitive program right now. I mean, heck, this is now. When I started covering Pitt, it was DeMar Hamlin and Paris Ford, and they were these safeties that would just be the pillar players, and they were great safeties, and Pitt was lucky to have them. And they were both gone within a year, and then they got Brandon Hill and Eric Hallett, and we thought great safeties, pillar players, they're huge for the secondary. Now you got Jason McIntyre, taking over, getting an interception, and looking like he's the next stud of the secondary. Then you get McMillan. They do a really good job of bringing guys up. The offensive line, who brought them all back last year, there is excitement for the new guys that can step up at that position. Same thing for the defensive line. This is a program that is developing young talent, keeping it young talent, and ready to play young talent. I think that's going to keep that going, and that's why recruiting stays open even after National Signing Day.
Yeah, that's what to finalize this point. I mean, not every high school recruit commits on signing day. There are kids who are still waiting to find out stuff about their grades. There are kids who are still waiting to see, like what you said, how things unfold at programs that have showed them interest. They want to see if that coach that offered them the scholarship is going to be there come January or come February. And there's a whole bunch of factors still at play where there's still high school prospects out there that Pitt can land and transfer portal guys. We'll switch over to the basketball side now. Steve wants to know, does Pitt's win over North Carolina make it a tournament team? No, not yet, but it's trending in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, you don't go to the tournament for winning a game in late December. Right. But and plus, we've seen Jeff Capel teams with major upsets over time. I'll never forget when they were 8-2, beat Duke, and Justin Champagnie said the fated words, "Pitt is back," and then they finished like 1-10 the rest of the season. And so don't say, that's why Pitt fan, don't say it, to just stay away. But I'll say this though, Noah, and Cale Berger made a great point of this in the final word with me Sunday night. That win against North Carolina, I do think, was momentous because not only did they beat a ranked team and a blue blood ranked team, but there was a legit crowd for that game. It didn't look as first to start. I will say, start getting to the Pete a lot earlier. Construction's getting worse around Oakland. So if you're a Pitt fan who wants to get the games, try to get there 2 hours early because it was a hassle getting up that hill. But with the game, I'll say this with how Pitt won the game. It was packed. Pitt fans were excited. And Noah, you and I have covered a lot of games already, and there's been so many games. We're like, man, it's dead in here. And it's just so sad with all the games that we grew up watching, the Pete just being packed and being ecstatic. And this felt like a little bit more like that atmosphere. And the students are still gone for the most part. Like the zoo, it's filled. But this was still winter break. So I thought that was really cool. And the big thing, again, was that with that crowd, you had several of those recruits, the guys that are already committed, the 4-star guys, and local kids in the Whitfield that they're trying to attract, trying to say, hey, Pitt will be a place for you to play. You see a win like that, and you're going to think, man, maybe this is the place to be. Maybe Jeff Capel does have things trending in the right direction. I think that's the biggest part of that. Heck, I just did the story with interviewing the 4-star football commit, Day Farmer. You don't think winning in big environments at home and showing that means a lot? One of the first things he said after Taekwon Underwood's recruitment was that seeing the backyard brawl, he was like, yeah, I want to play here. I think if a Pitt basketball group was there, seeing the way that they beat UNC in their own house with the excited crowd that was there, that definitely helped Pitt's case in keeping some of those recruits and maybe attracting some others.
Pitt's not a program where it's going to have national exposure every single game. No. It's just not. So when it gets to play a North Carolina, a Duke in basketball, or when it plays a Clemson in football like it did last season, or when it gets a backyard brawl standalone game essentially on the opening week of the college football season with game day there, it's so important to capitalize on those opportunities. And to Pitt's credit, it really has done that in its big games in recent history. And it not only helps recruits, like you said, Chris, but it captures the attention of narrative creators like ourselves, the people who vote in these polls, the people who have a say in who gets a bid to the dance and who doesn't. And while I'm confident that no one saw Pitt's win over North Carolina, a team that's drastically underachieved for its expectations it entered the season with, and thought, oh, wow, well, the Pitt basketball program's back to where Jamie Dixon had it, and we got to pencil them into a Sweet 16 right now. No. But what it does is it's Pitt's first victory over a team that will be in the tournament. Northwestern and NC State, those are bubble teams right now. If you look at any bracketology, be it on ESPN, Fox Sports, CBS, wherever, NC State and Northwestern are always in the first 4 in, the last 4 in, or the first 4 out. And those are still good wins. Pitt needs those type of wins too. Those are the wins that actually Pitt needs more of. But now Pitt has its first resume building victory to say when North Carolina eventually does figure it out, because it's just too talented not to. When North Carolina's ending the year as a top 20 team, Pitt can point out and say, we beat them. We beat them when they were red hot, when they recovered from that losing streak, when they were coming off wins over Ohio State and Michigan and all these decent programs. We took them down. And, North Carolina might get revenge later on, and that's okay. A split with North Carolina for any team in the country is something that it can put on its resume as a victory. And Pitt's going to need to get a couple more of those wins. Thankfully, it will have the chance to do that. It has a great game Tuesday against Virginia. It has another tough contest next week against Duke. It will play Miami a couple of times this year as well. Those are games that if Pitt loses, no real harm done. But if it can win, it's going to really start to gain a lot of legitimacy on its 2022-23 campaign.
I believe I saw Ken Palm with its updated projections of how teams will finish in the ACC, and they had them finishing 13-7. And if Pitt finishes 13-7 in the ACC, that means they're finishing with 20 wins on the season.
Right.
So that puts you right into the tournament conversation, which, as I recall last week, someone in this show predicted that this team is going to go dancing.
Listen, I mean, this is exciting without question, but Pitt, people don't remember this, but Pitt's been in this spot before. In 2020, they were right around where they are now with a winning record, with a marquee victory, and Duke, unfortunately for Pitt that year, kind of fell apart. So that team wasn't going to really do anything regardless, but or that win didn't end up looking as great as it once did. But overall, I mean, Pitt showed promise under Capel. It's learning how to win in January and, more importantly, February. And we just got to January. So if the Panthers can continue to win the games they're supposed to win, steal a victory that they're not supposed to have, like the one they had on Friday, they're going to set themselves up in a decent spot. Does 20 wins in this year's ACC get Pitt into the tournament? I'm not 100% confident in that. I think it, without question, gets them into the NIT. It definitely gets them onto the bubble. I think that the losses to VCU and Vanderbilt might hurt them, but we got to find out, where do those wins come from if Pitt does reach 20 wins? If it can beat a Miami or a Virginia or a Duke on top of what it did against North Carolina, now we really have something. But we got to see. This could also be a shot in the pan or a flash in the pan. You never know with Pitt basketball and what it's been recently. We'll finish it up, and this kind of goes off of what we're saying. How do you see Pitt basketball faring in its next 3 games? Chris, you mentioned the name Cale Berger. I was on his show on The Fan, I think, last week, and he was asking me about the 4-game stretch that included North Carolina, because the next 3 games are Virginia, who's the rankings haven't come out yet, but I'm assuming they'll be close to a top 10 team. And then you have Clemson, who's at the top of the ACC standings with Pitt, and then Duke, who is Duke, another ranked team that's got top tier talent. And I said, if Pitt can go 2-2 in that 4-game stretch, that's a win. They've already got one of the hard wins. I think that Pitt will be able to handle its business against Clemson, who, granted, 4-0 in the ACC. I think Pitt matches up well against them and should be able to win Saturday. But man, oh man, if it's able to steal another win, if it beats Virginia Tuesday night, Pitt's going to be ranked.
All bets are off.
Pitt will be ranked if it beats Virginia, as long as it doesn't lose to Syracuse Saturday, because that'll be a 5-0 ACC start. However, I think Pitt will lose to Virginia. Capel historically has just not had a lot of success against Tony Bennett. I mean, I feel like every Pitt matchup you really go back to against the Cavaliers has been a rough showing there. They just don't play them well. So and that loss won't really hurt them. But I think they got to beat Clemson. Playing at Cameron Indoor is not easy for anyone. I'll say they go 1-2 in the next 3. Carter, what about you?
I think that's totally fair. You look at how they, how Virginia's played. One thing I'll say about Tony Bennett's team, they're always defensive heavy. They would never, even when they don't have all the talent in the world, they're the best defense in the ACC. Right now they're averaging only 58 points per game allowed. That's ridiculous. But that's what Tony Bennett does. He's a great coach. But I've been here for some of those times when Tony Bennett, he was like, listen, and after every time that he would be Pitt, he's like, listen, y'all, let Jeff Capel do what he does. Like, he would give an emphatic backing of Jeff Capel. Like, what Jeff's building here is real and it's coming. Just give it time. And he's been a supporter and believer in Jeff Capel's efforts to rebuild things here at Pitt, even with all the bumps in the road. But I do think that Tony Bennett, what's what could be very different about this time playing Virginia. Jeff Capel has never had the shooting team that he has here at Pitt right now. And they had a rough time shooting against North Carolina and overcame it. I don't think that they can shoot that poorly and overcome Virginia, because Virginia is a team that they won't let Jamarius Burton get all those layups or all those mid-range jumpers. You're going to have to hit some of those outside shots. But if Nelly Cummings, Greg Elliott, Blake Hinson, if a combination of two of those three guys are hitting from outside, and then it starts to open things up for Federico and Burton and guys on the inside, I think it puts them at a very good chance to keep the win streak going and get another win in the ACC over Virginia. And if they beat the Virginia, it's going to sound a lot of alarms in the ACC. It's like, whoa, because normally Jeff Capel's teams of the past, when they get a big win, they fall off a cliff after that. They lose focus. And Jeff Capel talked about that. He's like, hey, the biggest thing is, like, when everyone was talking bad about us at the start of the season, we knew where we were. And now everyone's starting to talk good about us. We know where we are. They're not trying to pay attention to the outside noise. They're trying to pay attention to how they get better game after game, week by week, game plan by game plan. And I think that's what the path that you need to be on. And not just for this year, but for future years. You're hoping that, John Hughley eventually gets back around, that Federico sticks around, that Blake Hinson sticks around, that, guys, you're hoping that if Dior Johnson can come back next year, he's a redshirting this year, he's part of that. Then you have a culture of guys who know what it's like to play competitive, tough basketball and stay focused during long seasons and set the tone for that next crop of recruits that you're bringing in, the 4-star guys like Jalen Rowe and Carl Carnton and all those guys. You're setting the table for trying to finally get the program on a solid foundation where there's not a question coming into the year, can Pitt get back to relevance? It's like, oh no, there is something here. There is a culture that these kids can depend upon. I think that's where they're at right now. So they could beat Virginia. I wouldn't put my money down on that because, like you said, Tony Bennett's he's one of the great college basketball coaches out there, and he will be for quite some time. But you look at some of these games, Clemson, they're the 4th best offense and the 4th best defense, a very balanced team in the ACC. That'd be another game where if they win that, they deserve a lot of credit for it. And then Duke is Duke. But I agree. They win one of these next 3 games, they finish 2-2 in this stretch. There's still a lot to talk about because these are some really good basketball teams. These are the teams that would handle Pitt in their losing seasons of past under Jeff Capel and under Kevin Stallings. If they're able to split them, then you get a stretch with Georgia Tech, Louisville, Florida State, Wake Forest. None of those teams scare you a whole lot. No. You have a chance to go on a run there before you got to face Miami, who's also playing really good basketball right now. But again, you get through this stretch, win one of these next 2, you could be setting yourself up for a 13-plus conference win season, which, again, puts Pitt right in the mix to be one of those teams that could sneak into the dance.
Well said, Carter. As always, any final thoughts as we wrap this one up?
Just a thoughts on this. I think this, there's a lot of times we could say, this was the best weekend for Pitt sports with the soccer, Final Fours and the volleyball Final Fours. But it's tough to think back and think all of the things that happened, not just with Pitt football winning the bowl game, with all the opt-outs they had, with the way that they won the bowl game, and not just the winning at the Pete, against a ranked opponent, the way that they won with the crowd that was there. But then also, after all that's said and done, to go see Kenny Pickett lead another game-winning drive for the Pittsburgh Steelers on primetime football to keep the Steelers' playoff hopes alive. I think there's a lot of things to be happy about if you're a Pitt fan right now. And I know that there's this is a disappointing season because they only won 9 games. They didn't get back to the ACC championship. And listen, you have every right. I'm not making fun of you, but I think that you are looking past a whole lot of joy that Pitt fans should deserve to feel right now if you're trying to feel bad about Pitt athletics. I think they're in a very good place, both with the players that are in the program right now and the alumni playing in professional sports. Really good time for Pitt sports, and Pitt fans, just enjoy this right now. Soak it in and feel good about yourselves. I know it's very hard to the Pitt fan base to say that sometimes.
I think the last time Pitt had such a successful day compared to Friday, 1963, I believe they beat Penn State in football and Duquesne in the City League game in the same afternoon.
That's pretty awesome. And
that'd be a good one.
When Duquesne was Duquesne.
Right, exactly. So that'd be a good one. I'm sure there are other ones that we're forgetting as well. But that's all we got. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Follow us on social media. Be sure to submit more questions in the future. We'll have more Pitt mailbags for you every Tuesday here on the Post-Gazette Sports Now YouTube channel. Take care.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.